Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this evening. I'm very proud to be here, joined by some extraordinary public servants, members of my team who've worked so long and hard, Secretary of the Governor, Karen Persicilli-Keough, Counsel to the Governor, Liz Fine, and Budget Director with years of experience, so we appreciate it very much, Bob Magna, for joining us. And today we're here to announce that a conceptual agreement has been reached on the fiscal year 24 budget. And I want to first of all give a heartfelt thank you to my partners in government, the leader of the Senate, Andre Stewart-Cousins, the Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, and their teams. They have worked extraordinarily hard as well, and they should be proud of the work they've accomplished. A lot of long nights, a lot of lengthy discussions, difficult discussions, 7 days a week, but I am so confident that we've assembled the greatest team to work together to put forth a plan that is a blueprint for the future of New York. And I know this budget process has taken a little extra time, but our commitment to the future of New York was driving this. And I believe today we'll be able to unveil the concepts of a framework that'll reveal that what was important is not a race to a deadline, but a race to the right results. I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about how this budget will position us for generations to come. I laid out a bold vision, a way to make New York safer, more affordable, and more livable. It's what I call the New York dream. And sadly, this dream has been elusive for too many New Yorkers. And that's why this is an historic day for the great state of New York, as we take one step closer to helping millions of New Yorkers achieve that dream of better, more inclusive opportunities for people, making people feel safer when they walk down the streets, where they can find opportunity and success for themselves and their families. That's what this budget is all about. And now let's get into the details. And there's a lot of them. The overall budget is approximately $229 billion. It is balanced. It supports our bold vision for the future without spending beyond our means. The percent of state operating funds in reserves, and I point out last year with my first budget, this was very important to me because you do not know what's going to happen, the headwinds that lie before us, the economic challenges that could still unfold with a recession. I want to make sure we protected New Yorkers, and that's why our reserves are still 15%. But like I said, the economy remains volatile, and reminding us why we had to be prudent this year and we'll have to be prudent heading into the years ahead. I've always said that every New Yorker deserves to live in a community that is safe and peaceful, and I've been laser focused on making that dream become a reality. I want to start by talking about New York's bail laws. I've always been clear on where I stand on this issue. Overall, bail reform was needed. I support the core of its true premise, that no one, regardless of money, should be incarcerated because they don't have enough. Accused of the same offense as another individual, one goes free, one goes to Rikers or another jail, simply because they don't have enough money before they've been determined to be guilty. But I do believe that judges should have more authority to set bail and detain dangerous defendants. Data shows that recent decreases in recidivism for the low-level offenses, that's positive, but increases in recidivism for defendants charged with serious crimes. That's why it was very clear that changes need to be made. I'm here to announce that we've made improvements to our bail laws. The agreement removes what is known as the least restrictive means standard, which many judges have said tied their hands. It gives judges discretion. They need to hold violent criminals accountable, while still upholding our commitment to a justice system that is fair and accessible to all, and also ensuring that poverty is never treated as a crime. We knew that changing the bail laws was not all we needed to do to keep New Yorkers safe and improve our criminal justice system. That's why we're investing in this budget $40 million for public defenders to help them retain staff and enhance the services they provide to vulnerable New Yorkers. Also, for the first time in 2 decades, we're giving a pay increase to assigned attorneys who represent individuals unable to afford their own counsel. We're also supporting investing in violence prevention and doubling down on what we know works. The gun-involved elimination initiative known as GIVE, where we send money to communities, and I've seen this work. I've been out in communities like Rochester and Syracuse where this has been successful. I'm proud to announce the largest investment in this successful program. When I first became governor, the investment was $6 million. This year it'll be $36 million. I also want to make sure that our state police have the resources they need to protect New Yorkers, increasing our stabilization units, increasing a number of state police classes, but also making sure that we support our district attorneys as well, ensuring that they have $40 million to do their jobs as well. When it comes to keeping people safe, there are common sense places we can start as well. One of them has to do with fixing our mental health system, because it is broken. The rates of mental illness have been on the rise, and the pandemic only made matters far worse. Too many people can't get the care they need, and for too long we've underinvested in mental health. Today remarks a reversal in our state's approach, a monumental shift. That's why I'm proud to announce that our budget accomplishes over $1 billion and makes critical policy changes to finally and fully meet the needs of New Yorkers. That'll include an investment to create 1,000 inpatient psychiatric beds to serve more than 10,000 New Yorkers a year, investing $60 million in capital and $122 million in operating and outpatient services, allowing patients to be reintegrated into communities and society, supportive housing, 3,500 units. We also know that health care often doesn't cover mental health care. So my budget, as proposed, will prohibit insurance companies from denying access to critical mental health services. We're also going to focus on children's health, children's mental health. They need services now. You give them the services now, you keep them from needing more serious services in the future. So our $30 million investment will help meet the needs of our children and hopefully cut the demand for services by half over the next 5 years. We're also expanding Medicaid access with a $100 million investment for preventative and primary care. We're making the largest Medicaid rate increase in 2 decades, investing in hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living centers, all to stabilize our state's healthcare system. Last year, we invested over $3.9 billion in 4 years to help our distressed hospitals. This year, we're making an additional $500 million investment to ensure they have the resources they need to provide this care. But you can't talk about health care without talking about reproductive health care. And as we saw this past month, extremist mega judges and legislators won't stop just at overturning Roe v. Wade. They want to implement a national abortion ban and dismantle reproductive health as we know it. But we remind everyone this is New York, the birthplace of the women's rights movement. And as long as I'm governor, this will continue to be a place that is a sanctuary to protect women's rights, and abortion will remain safe, accessible, and legal. We're bolstering that commitment with $100 million in new funding to protect reproductive health care and solidify our historic standing as New York's first safe harbor state. I'm proposing 2 pieces of legislation within the budget. We'll be passing them shortly. Increasing access to abortion care for students at public universities and protecting access to over-the-counter contraception at state pharmacies. The legislation recognized the urgency of these bills and passed them already. I look forward to signing them in the coming days. Now let's turn to another matter. The key to our kids' future is a high-quality education. Last year, we worked with legislators and invested over $31 billion in school aid, more than ever before. This year, we're breaking records again because we have to. Our kids and our teachers still need our help. Kids are still struggling after the pandemic. Our teachers have been through so much. So to get schools back on track, we're providing $34.5 billion, the largest investment for schools in state history. This includes $2.6 billion in foundation aid for a record of $24 billion to delivering on my promise to fully fund that formula for the first time ever. Now, just to put it in context, foundation wage was first implemented over 16 years ago. It took this long to help those high-need schools get what they needed. And finally, we're doing that with this budget today. But also for kids to be successful in school. They can't sit there with their stomachs growling. They're hungry. They need nutritious food to focus and thrive. The budget provides $134 million to serve low-income populations so kids can eat breakfast and lunch at school at no charge at all, regardless of their family income. We're also increasing the number of charter schools, the zombie schools, to give schools more choice. We want to make sure that children are poised for success when they graduate from high school and giving parents the options they've been asking for. We're also investing $20 million in early education high school, P-TECH programs, helping kids earn college credits while they're still in high school. I've seen this work. It's an incredible program in prioritizing high-needed districts. But also I want to make sure, and I've said this before, I want to restore the preeminence of our public higher education system. It's been disinvested in for decades. I want this to be a shining star for all New Yorkers, something we all can be proud of. And that's why we're making, once again, significant investments in SUNY's transformation and CUNY's strategic needs. $2.4 billion for new capital projects, $381 million in capital support. As well as we're establishing a state matching fund for endowment contributions to provide long-term funding for the university centers. But also, if you think about our kids, we need affordable, accessible child care. As the first mother to lead this state, this is something that's personal to me. I know what happens when you don't have affordable, accessible child care. And so, on behalf of all the parents, this one's for you. We want to make sure that you have what's available to you, because right now, less than 10% of parents eligible for child care assistance are actually using those resources. Think about that. The money's been there, the resources have been there, but only 10% of eligible parents are taking advantage of this. But it's all changing with this budget. We're expanding eligibility. We're raising the income limit so we can have 113,000 more families with their children eligible for this assistance. On top of that, we're lowering the amount of money that parents would have to pay for child care and making sure that we're expanding, once again, for the first time ever, expanding the child care tax credit to include children under 4 years old. Up until now, that tax credit has only been available for children 5 and up. When you think about young parents, the cost of diapers and formula, it's more expensive for those little ones. So this is going to help our families in dealing with the affordability crisis that we said we'd address. So we're going to make sure that they have more options and help deal with this by helping parents any way we can. And also, let's talk about another way we can deal with the affordability issue. I tackled this. I said I'll find any way we can to help reduce the cost of living in our state. The average cost of monthly goods and energy for low-income households has increased by more than 13% in the last 2 years. That's a huge increase for people. It's clear that high inflation is pushing the most vulnerable New Yorkers to the breaking point. So starting in 2024, we're changing that. We're raising the minimum wage to $16 in New York City, Long Island, and Westchester, $15 elsewhere in the state, with 50-cent increases in both 25 and 26. But starting in 2027, the minimum wage will increase annually according to the Consumer Price Index. In other words, if costs go up, so will your wages. There are nearly 900,000 minimum wage earners in New York State, more likely women, more likely people of color, and many are single moms. For them, this will be a lifeline for them and protects them from labor exploitation and gives them a measure of security that they've not had until now. Another area that's really important to me, you know this, I've talked about this a lot, housing. It's been central to my agenda from day one. We have a crisis for far too many New Yorkers. Affordable housing, their rent, their mortgage, it's out of reach. And we've simply not kept up with demand. And that drives up costs, basic supply and demand, and it prices out middle and low-income families from the dream of home ownership. That's why I proposed a bold housing plan, and I believe major action is required to meet the scale of this crisis. The legislature saw it differently. They're not ready to commit to the kind of transformative change I proposed. And I know change can be hard, but we're not walking away from this issue. And I won't stop working hard and fighting until we make housing more affordable for New Yorkers. So I've talked to the leaders. I've committed to working with them. We're together in our desire to do whatever we can to ensure that we've done all we can to increase the supply of housing in the state of New York. And I also believe there's more we can do by executive action, which will be unfolding publicly in the next few weeks. But one thing I do know, when you look at comparing us to other states that have made the tough decisions and have made a difference, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in 3 months. In many cases, it took decades. But I'm impatient. We started the discussion. We started the conversation. And people know that I'm a fighter, and I'm going to continue working with anyone who'll roll up their sleeves and help us change the trajectory that our state is on right now, which is that we do not have enough housing for New Yorkers. So we'll work with advocates, legislators, and I know we can do that here and overcome all obstacles. So let's help the people who are struggling right now, those who fell behind in their rent during the pandemic. We're adding $391 million in additional funding. We're expanding the Emergency Rental Assistance Program to make rent relief available for people living in public and subsidized housing. They were left out of the earlier programs based on earlier formulas. We're also focused on helping low-income families, homeowners, stay in their homes with $50 million to help them with the cost of home repairs. We're proud of creating a nation-leading program as well to get lead out of kids' homes. And this has been a real driver of disparate outcomes in children's mental health, their academic ability, and that's why it's so important that we reduce lead poisoning in our homes across the state. It's time to do something about it. It's way overdue. So the state's going to ensure that all rental units before 1980 are inspected for lead every 3 years. And property owners who don't get rid of this, get rid of the lead, will lose their certificate of occupancy. It's that simple. Let's talk about something else. The MTA, the lifeblood of New York City. It's rebounding from COVID. Just last week, the MTA set a record for ridership post-COVID of 4 million riders. That's good news. We've been plateaued for a while, but now we're moving ahead. But we still have, as a result of the pandemic, the MTA is facing stark financial challenges. The choice was just wait and see what happens, kick the can down the road, or launch a bold strategy of sustainability to shore up and ensure the viability of the MTA for years to come. So, working hard, we rolled up our sleeves again and came up with a plan to generate additional revenue for the MTA. Through a minor increase in the payroll and mobility tax for New York City's largest businesses, we'll provide over $1.1 billion for the MTA. New York City will increase its contribution to paratransit services, support the MTA with an additional $165 million a year, and the MTA will also implement a $400 million plan to make their operations more efficient and save money. And with this budget, commuters in the New York City region will know that this program will not be jeopardized. We're not cutting services. We're not curtailing our investments in this critical piece of infrastructure. So I'm also pleased to announce, as we encourage more people to take buses, take public transportation, that we're launching a 2-year pilot program in New York City to offer free bus service on 5 different lines, 1 in each of the boroughs. And the MTA will decide where the lucky areas are. Let's talk about something else. Rising energy costs. Many families, again, we talk about affordability. Low-income families are facing energy increases of 20 to 30%, higher than just 1 year ago. There's no way they could have budgeted for that. With this budget, we're insulating vulnerable households from exorbitant energy bills and building a more sustainable future. We're investing $400 million to deliver immediate utility relief for hundreds of thousands of vulnerable New Yorkers and provide low-income households with resources to upgrade their appliances, insulation, and heating systems. And that'll go hand in hand with our efforts, with our nation-leading effort to address climate change. Everyone knows. We've seen the effects of climate change, the storms, the hurricanes coming to New York, record snow amounts. We're seeing the effects every single day, not just here, but across the nation. Our budget prioritizes nation-leading climate action that meets this moment with ambition and the commitment it demands. So we're dedicating $500 million to build the clean water infrastructure that our communities need, bringing our total investment to $5 billion over the last few years. We're also directing $400 million from the Environmental Protection Fund to preserve open space and advance conservation across New York. And we're going to be the first state in the nation to advance zero-emission new homes and buildings, beginning in 2025 for small buildings, 2028 for large buildings. And we have more to do. And we're going to be working with the legislature if we finalize the budget, as well as getting through the end of the session. But here's a quick preview of what we're doing. A lot of funding is going to localities and generate capital projects in the pipeline. But here we go. I said I would do the hard things in my state of the state. I do not back down from a fight. Not now, not ever. We've accomplished a great deal. We've had a lot of intense conversations. But I believe that New Yorkers will be proud of this budget. It serves so many different needs and helps so many different people, and that's why I'm proud of it. And I also know that I said I would make our state safer, more affordable, more livable for New Yorkers of today and tomorrow. Now that we're reaching the end of this process, I'm confident that's exactly what this budget delivers. Years from now, people will look back at our time, just still coming out of the pandemic. What did we accomplish? Did we accomplish what this moment called for? Did we make a difference in the lives of others? We're going to be able to answer that question, yes. We invested where we need to invest and let people know they matter. That regardless of where they live in the state of New York, we understand their concerns. They're worried about their safety of their families. They're worried about paying their bills, paying for child care, good education. So now we're building a path of shared prosperity for all New Yorkers, and I'm very proud of this budget. Thank you very much.
All right, any questions on the budget? Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
Governor, can you tell us what happened with discovery reform? We were told late today that it dropped out.
Yes. This is something that the district attorneys had brought to our attention, asking for some changes. Went through the process of back and forth with the houses. We talked about it at the tables. We thought we had a plan that met the needs, and the district attorneys decided that that was not the path they wanted to go on, despite saying so initially. So since this was not going to do what they'd asked for in their minds, we decided to pull it, and if they want to work on it during the session, that's certainly an option that's available.
John?
Governor, two questions. First, can you explain, in your mind, what a conceptual agreement is? I mean, yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Yes, it's what I'm talking about tonight. I talked to the leaders constantly, but a few hours ago, we agreed that we're at a point where the major decisions have been made. There's obviously fine-tuning that has to be done. That'll be worked out over the weekend, but literally bills can start being printed, and we're on a path to shutting down the budget process.
And also on MTA funding, you said $165 million for prepared transit services from New York City. That's less than the $500 million you were seeking initially. The payroll tax is only in New York City. It's not the entire MTA region. So how are you making up the difference between your original proposal and this conceptual?
No, we'll have enough resources. The numbers work out, and I'll have our budget director explain that. But this is all part of negotiation. And we put out a plan saying we can either do something about the MTA or just ignore it. A lot of people in the past have just ignored it. They've not made the investments that need to be made to have a long-term sustainable plan. We could have just done this year to year. But I said, this is too important. This asset is so critical to bring back New York City and the region. So we put forth a plan that we believe will generate the sufficient revenues to make it operational for the next few years. But Bob, anything to add to that? Oh, Bob's on there. Okay, Bob.
Governor? No, I think you answered it, Governor. We adjusted the tax rate pieces so that they would cover a big chunk of what we changed. So I think, within the same box that the Governor described, which was a combination of tax piece with the PMT, a city contribution, a modified fare increase, and other actions that the MTA was taking within the entire envelope that the governor proposed. You know, we fit this plan together. So it's not dramatically different than what the governor initially proposed.
Is there an additional state contribution as part of this?
Not different than what was proposed in the budget, which was a one-time, relatively small state contribution. I think we engineered it around the other elements where we changed them a little bit, but no, there's no other additional state contribution.
Governor, why do you think removing the least restrictive conditions standard for bail-eligible offenses, I assume, will make New Yorkers safer? And what is the metric of success to judge it in the next months or years?
The metric to success will be, can we drive down recidivism the same way we have with lower level offenses? That's a gap that's been borne out by data. We want to make sure we can deal with that. But also, many judges would say to us, right now we have two different standards in the law. One tells us to look at certain factors. Another section tells us to look at factors, but you can only consider the least restrictive means to ensure the defendant returns to court. And judges have leaned on that, and there's some horrific cases splashed on the front pages of newspapers where they talk about individuals where a judge and the defense lawyer said, following the least restrictive means, you have to let this person out. And some of those cases literally shock the conscience. You cannot believe that someone was let out, and they say, my hands are tied, I have to follow the least restrictive means. So it was important to remove that, to give the judges the clarity. Don't fall back on that, but look at other factors in determining whether or not this person should be remanded or whether or not they should be let out on recognizance or with bail.
Okay, Grace. Governor, you proposed both a cap and invest program and allowing the public authority to build renewable energy projects. I'm hoping you could speak to where both of those proposals landed and why.
Right. What we're doing is setting up a mechanism to be able to allow for rebates that will be generated with a cap and invest program. And we think that is an important first step because we couldn't do it under existing law. And so we'll be working out the details on cap and invest, which will literally generate billions of dollars to help New Yorkers offset the costs of transitioning to a new form of energy, which when it happens, ultimately the cost of energy will be less, but there are obviously initial startup costs. So we want to make sure we had a very healthy fund to make that easier. We're focusing on aggressive climate protections, but we have to make sure that they're affordable for New Yorkers or it won't work. And so that's what we came to agree on. Anything else I missed on that, Liz or Karen?
No, I think you answered it, Governor, and I think we'll see some of the details when we print the budget.
Okay. Still to be.
And the Power Authority's ability to build renewable energy.
Yes. That is in the budget as well. Yes.
Okay, Governor, is it end of 2025 for the build? Can you provide more details about the all-electric buildings? Is that end of 2025? And what's the cutoff for large versus
What's the cutoff on buildings? All right.
For electrification, 2030, and with some mechanisms to ensure that we have a strong power grid in the state.
Okay, Macy, can you talk about the agreement made on cracking down on illicit pot shops? I know you mentioned that in the
Yes, yes. That was very important to me as well. All across the state, splashed on the front pages of even the Buffalo News and elsewhere around the state. I see people are so frustrated because we are working so hard to stand up a legal business, and there are obviously startup challenges. It's grand in its scale, but it's going to take some time, and it has been. So we literally have 5 businesses that are legal in the state of New York. Any other place that's selling cannabis is illegal because they're not authorized by the state of New York. What we did not have was a mechanism for individuals from Office of Cannabis Management or from our state tax and finance office to go in and enforce the laws. They weren't even able to allow to do searches because we only had civil penalties and not criminal penalties. So now we're going to have a situation where we're going after not people on the street, not, we're not changing the laws in that respect, but allowing for there to be prosecution of individuals who are thwarting New York State tax laws. It's called tax fraud. If they're not collecting taxes or paying the taxes, then that is a misdemeanor, and that offense allows the authorities to go in and to do the searches they need. And also, there's another part. Liz, you're very familiar with this. Want to answer that?
So the key is that the Department of Taxation and Finance has to have the power and the tools to go in and search and seize illegal product from illegal dispensaries. And that is one part of the law. And the law will provide them with those key tools. The second part will allow OCM to have tools to also go in and close down illegal dispensaries, and we're working on the details of that. It will be finally, hopefully, a change in how we deal with the illegal dispensaries, and the state will be able to show that illegal dispensaries cannot continue to thrive in New York.
Are there any worries that that will conflict with the whole idea behind the licensing process on giving priority to those who had past convictions?
No, that program stays in place. There are only 5 open thus far. There are quite a few people that are still waiting for it, and you think about from their perspective, these entrepreneurs who obviously have to show a track record of having understand a business, who've run a business, many of them, and we've been working to help stand them up. But if they're looking at the landscape and seeing that there are literally thousands of illegal dealers that are making a lot of money, how are they possibly going to thrive in that environment? So we need to get very aggressive in our crackdown of the illegal facilities and storefronts that we see popping up, proliferating all over the city of New York, but all over the state. So we're focused on helping those individuals that were promised a shot to start a business and be successful, as well as generate substantial funds for a social equity fund that will go into the communities that have been hardest hit by prosecution of the marijuana laws in the past. So we want all that to still work. It's still on track, but this dynamic of all these illegals popping up has made it more complicated. That's why I wanted to take this budget as an opportunity for us to put more teeth out there to help OCM, Office of Cannabis Management, and Tax and Finance to have the tools they have not had thus far to go in and do the job.
Okay, Jimmy?
Governor, it's been an eventful 4 months for you. This budget is almost 30 days later. It's probably going to be about 30 days late for adoption, which is later than usual. The Hector LaSalle rejection, and then the renomination, and then the housing plan that didn't quite make it through in budget talks. So I hear from people who say that you're sort of on a downward. You're in a little bit of a trough. So I'm wondering, how do you feel you're doing coming out of this budget process, coming out of these few months, and how do you feel set up for the end of session and the years and decades to come?
No, this is a transformative budget, and I will never shy away from a fight. You're not always going to win. You're not always going to win. And I'm not going to quote Wayne Gretzky again, because I'm only a hockey fan. I love all the sports. But this state requires a leader who's not afraid to get knocked down once in a while, because I always get back up. And I get back up even more committed to take on the challenges. Housing is an enormous challenge. People have written about the fact that no one has touched this topic for 30, 40 years. My parents, when they were 29 and 30 years old, were activists trying to open up more housing to people of color in our hometown. My dad was barely a kid, and they took on this challenge in 1965. It is disgraceful that in 2023, we still can't open up our communities to multi-family housing to help our young people and people just starting out and our seniors to have a place to live. But also you look at the space that's around our transit hubs. They could be magnificent. There's great examples. So, Jimmy, it's not going to be easy. But I didn't come here to do easy. So there will be knockdowns. I'm just getting started. I've just begun my term as governor, and I feel very confident that when people see what went into this budget, the issues that we took on, fighting for climate change, fighting for public safety, fighting to make sure that our families can live a more affordable life. I'll do this every year that I'm blessed to be governor. And I don't care critics say at the time or what's going on. I'm proud of the court that's been put in place. We have outstanding jurists that represent the state of New York. People should be proud of that. And I think this budget overwhelmingly is a great success. And if housing is the one area where we need to do more, I've already said that. That is not new to me. And anybody who wants to work with me to get this done, line up.
Governor, on housing, are there any elements that could carry over from your initial budget proposal into the post-budget session or maybe even into the next couple of years or so?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, Nick, and that's exactly what I spoke to the leaders about. You know, there are areas where we can be talking about, especially stimulating housing growth in the city of New York. I mean, that's a dire area where we need changes in 421A. You know, we have to incentivize people to build affordable housing. We have to deal with the Florida area ratios because we could have more density, the density that was allowed back in the 1930s and 40s. We don't allow now. There's so many arcane rules out there that we need to put forth. Now, a budget is a compressed time frame. It's an intense time frame, but we're going to take the time necessary to talk about other ways that we can make sure that we're building housing stock. I'm going to be looking at the suburbs. We're going to talk about our transit hubs and find a path forward because we're not surrendering on this issue. And so we have the end of session, opportunities to talk there, opportunities, and I've made this commitment with the leaders. Let's sit down together. Let's sit down with the housing chairs and come up with a thoughtful approach, work on it throughout the next year as well, and look at it again next year's budget.
So you kind of just follow up, do you expect strategy and policy to kind of both change on that?
I'm going to take a fresh look at everything we proposed, but I do know that there's 4 or 5 initiatives that are important to the city of New York. It's something Mayor Adams and I want to get done, and those are not moving off my agenda as well. But also we'll take a look at the suburbs and see what we can do to incentivize more growth everywhere from downstate up to the North Country. So we're not done.
Channel 6 in the back.
Hey, Governor. How much does criminal recidivism concern you? I heard you talking about that a couple minutes ago. And also, are you ready to endorse the current president for his second term?
Well, I already have. I tweeted out, I'm with Joe, so that's out there. I'm delighted to, I just spoke to the president on a call yesterday. Very excited to support President Biden's reelection. What he has done for the state of New York, and I told him this, I'll be at Micron tomorrow, where they're going to be putting shovels in the ground very soon, working on a community agreement of $500 million investment in Syracuse to get ready for Micron coming. That happened because President Biden and Senator Schumer put together a bill that changed the landscape, and we were able to amplify that by bringing our own program, working with the legislature, $10 billion to incentivize semiconductors. That's just one small example of how President Biden has changed the future of New Yorkers, and I'm absolutely with him 100%. First part of your question?
Criminal recidivism. How much did that concern you, Governor, when you went into these discussions?
Well, we're concerned about public safety overall. People have this sense of unease. I'm not satisfied with where we are. We have more to do, and recidivism is a problem. But that's not just related to bail. There's a lot of reasons behind that. And we're taking a holistic look at the criminal justice system. That's why our new partners in the Court of Appeals as well, the Office of Court Administration, we're working together. We talked about this. Working together to find out why it takes so long for someone to be able to even have their day in court. When people are languishing, sometimes they're held in jail, sometimes they're out in the street. The longer that goes, there's more chance and opportunity for people to recommit crimes. Part of that is the failure of a system that does not allow people to have their day in court for far too long. So I'm concerned about that, but there's many factors that are surrounding it. But that's another one of the issues I'm willing to take on.
Governor, in the bail proposal, does it still include the return to court standard that your original proposal did not have?
Liz has the exact language of that.
It does have the return to court standard, but instead of least restrictive, the standard is that the court must consider the kind and degree of control or restriction necessary to ensure the defendant's return to court.
And Governor, I just wanted to follow up on what Jimmy was asking. Your statement sounded like it was a promise of sorts that we can expect more late budgets if it means that you are, fighting for these various priorities. Should New Yorkers expect more late budgets from your time as governor?
I don't think I just stood here and promised more late budgets.
Well, are you saying that New Yorkers should not expect a later budget next year? Last year's budget was late, this year's budget's even later. If it means that you are able to include priorities such as bail and safety issues, are you saying that you are open to having more late budgets?
I will talk about the budget we have in front of us right now. Next year is an eternity away, and I'm going to continue focusing on important policy initiatives that better the lives of New Yorkers, and we'll always strive to meet our deadlines, and I'll leave it at that.
Governor, where did the proposal land on universal school meals? I know you said you were talking about that earlier this week.
Yes, we're adding more money to the program to expand more opportunities for people in lower income schools, and in those schools we're going to ensure that the meals are available to everyone, so there's no stigma associated with it, which has been a problem. So we're expanding. How much are we investing in that, Bob? I don't know if you have that number up.
It's roughly 130 million.
Okay, so we're investing money to expand the free meals to children, especially in those underserved communities.
Okay, time for a couple more, Bill.
Governor, you're announcing a three-person deal by yourself right now. How is your relationship with the legislative leaders after this session we've had in the past 4 months?
Stronger than you could possibly believe. We literally just spoke a couple hours ago. There's a lot of respect. This is tradition. We've done it this way before. This is our virtual handshake. But I have tremendous respect for them. I really, really do. We had a lot of very healthy debate on priorities. A lot of these issues are very emotional and they're heartfelt for the members and for the leaders. So for us to be able to come together and really put the people of this state at front and center and deal with policies that, again, will be transformative, I look forward to continuing to work with them the rest of the session, the rest of my tenure as governor, and it's a very healthy, strong relationship.
Jamie?
Exactly how many charter schools were agreed upon and why that number?
The 22 charter schools were the ones that had not been reauthorized. They had closed. 14 are in the city. 14 are in the city, and the rest were upstate. So there were 22 that had been shut down that fell within the cap. So that's the number.
Okay, Josh, and then we're good to go.
Governor, the legislature was interested in increasing taxes on the very wealthy in New York State. Some of what they wanted ended up panning out in the budget, like housing. Why do you think that didn't gain any traction here?
Well, I didn't propose a tax increase in my budget.
I'm saying, why do you think the legislature's suggestion of a tax increase on the very wealthy didn't gain any traction?
I do think that's a question for them. I didn't propose it. I don't want to raise taxes at this time. We have a surplus. We also know that we have to set aside money for reserves, but we were able to work together to put together a budget that didn't require any tax increases.
Would you say it was a part of negotiations at all?
I knew that it was in their one House bills, yes.
Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, thanks, everyone.